Philippines Inc. is now offering fee reimbursement for your IELTS. Just pass the test within June to September of 2020. Looking for something awesome? Avail of our Visa Screen sponsorship.
Hello everyone, this is Miko and welcome to Health Carousel Philippines #FastFacts, where we are going to answer some frequently asked questions about the NCLEX, Health Carousel programs, the IELTS, and many more. Well, a lot of nurses have been asking me or have been receiving a lot of questions regarding the IELTS. What IELTS module do you need to take? What or how important the IELTS is? What are the scores that you need to get? And if ever you wish to join Health Carousel Philippines, is it a requirement for you to have the IELTS? Well, it is a requirement or a credential that you need to obtain a visa screen certificate. In order to obtain a visa screen certificate, you would have to take the academic IELTS with scores of 7 in speaking and 6.5 in your overall band score. Prior to joining Health Carousel Philippines, it is an advantage if you would have an active IELTS. But of course, if you don't have one, we will definitely be assisting you with that examination. Again, this is Miko, and that's it for our #FastFacts.
Score a 9 in the IELTS? Join the 9.09er IELTS Review Center.
Most comprehensive, most up-to-date English reviewer. 9.09er IELTS Review Center. It's the Philippines' #1 IELTS Review Center. We're most on
IELTS Review Center.
It's the perfect place to score 9 in IELTS. It's a perfect place to score 9 in IELTS. 9.09 IELTS Review Center.
9.09er IELTS Review and Tutorial Center. I teach and prepare candidates for the IELTS and the PTE. But before my stint here at 9.09er, I was also a student of the center. I've taken both the IELTS and the PTE and have scored perfect marks for both exams. And that's all because of the help of 9.09er IELTS Review and Tutorial Center. I believe that test preparation is essential in getting satisfactory scores in these high-stakes English exams, and no other test preparation center prepares candidates as effectively as 9.09er.
To help them act it out. Take advantage of the same fact.
Hi, this is Irving Elaine Temporal, President and CEO of 9.09er Review Center. We established 9.09er in April of 2007, and in just 3 months of operation, we became the number 5 in the entire Philippines. 3 months after, that's October of 2007, we became the number 1 in the entire archipelago. It's 2020 now. We are still the undisputed number 1 review center for IELTS, UKVI, OET, PTE, and UKC. This is 9.09 Review Center. Welcome to your dream.
a pleasant evening to all of our participants and welcome to the IELTS Masterclass webinar. My name is Karen Merwenya and I will be your host for tonight. We have prepared a fun-filled learning session for you, so make sure to stay tuned until the end of the webinar. But before we begin, I would like to know where you guys are watching from, so kindly type in your location in our chat box so I could acknowledge you. Hi, good evening, Chelsea. I'm Bri from Riyadh. Justin John of Vergara. We also have Arlene Gonzaga, Paul Musca, Gwen Ducas of Baguio, Leia Marie Anisete. Wow, ang bilis. Christine Flores from Aklan. We have John Patrocinio from Canada. Hi, John from Canada. We have Lawrence Dave Amba from CDO. Good evening. Monero We. We also have Janice Garcia from Quezon City. Sheena Lang. We also have Oliver Marquez from Quezon City. Geraldine Brioso from Teresa Rizal. We have Nicole Ismael from Qatar. Rolette Pantoja from Laguna. And Zarina Isabel Pazon from Muntinlupa City. Ayan. So, welcome again and thank you guys for joining us this evening. And now, to give us the opening remarks, let me call on our director for processing, Miss Jill Cruz.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing today? I hope everyone is safe and healthy. So, thank you so much for making it to our webinar. And I know earlier today we had a presentation of the pictures of our team members. Those are the hardworking and dedicated advisors and team leaders that are helping you achieve your American dream. We all care about your success. And this is one of the initiatives that we have put together to ensure that you accomplish the target scores in IELTS. Of course, this is in collaboration with the president of 9.09er, Irvin McNeil Temporal. And of course, we look forward to his expert and advice on how we can best prepare for this exam. So I hope that your pen and papers are ready. Do take note of your takeaways from this session. And while your learnings are fresh, work on taking IELTS as soon as possible. Talk with your advisor on the different programs that we have to help you prepare for IELTS. And we also hope that you can join our Facebook community because this is another way that we can interact with you and answer any questions and concerns you may have. This is another platform where we can actually keep in touch. So thank you so much again for joining, and I hope you get a lot of takeaways from this session. And please share with us later on your feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miss Jill, for that inspiring words and reminders to our participants. But before we move on to the main event, let us first do an audio check.
Sound check, check. Mic 1, 2. Test. Mic, sound check.
Type the following code. Type Y to show you can hear us. Type N means you can't hear us. Type YN means our sound is breaking up. Type question mark if you don't understand anything. Okay, I can see everyone's great. Everyone can hear us. Everybody's audio is working. Okay, next up is our house rules. Okay, first house rule, participants other than the moderator and the speaker will be muted. Please maintain proper netiquette in the chat. Please take note of your questions. We will have a Q&A after the discussion of the written subtests and another after speaking. For questions and clarifications during the Q&A, click raise hand for the administrator to enable the microphone. You may also type in your questions in the Q&A box. Again, in the Q&A box, not on the chat box. And last, one question at a time will be entertained. Okay. So send us your feedback after this webinar. You can scan this QR code, I believe our panelists will also type in the link. Asan yung link? There you go. So you can also access the feedback form via the link on the chat box. Okay, next. Ayan, at the end of the session, we will have a group picture. So kindly enable your videos and wear your biggest smiles. And as a reminder, this session is being recorded. Okay. So I know you guys are all excited. So hindi ko na ito papatagalin. So our speaker for tonight is the founder and CEO of 9.09er IELTS Review Center. With 14 years of IELTS expertise and IELTS scores of 9.0 in listening, 9.0 in reading, 9.0 in speaking, and 8.0 in writing. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Mr. Irvin Neil Temporal.
Sound check. Check mic sound check. Do you hear me, guys? Okay. So I'll just have to share my screen for our PowerPoint. Share. Okay. There you go. So first things first, I'd like to thank Health Carousel Philippines Incorporated for this opportunity. This is actually my 4th time doing this with Health Carousel. So I did 2 live lectures in Metro Manila, 1 in Cebu, and this is the first time via the internet. And I'm very glad knowing that we have plenty of attendees from the Middle East, all over the Philippines. Now, I'm sure you are busy. I don't want to waste your time. That is why I promise that we're going to make the most out of the next 2 hours. So first things first, let's take a look at, one moment. Enter. Why can't I control my slide? My slide is not moving on to the next one. Let's try this one. From current slide. What could be wrong? There you go. Okay, it might be lagging, but anyway, International English Language Testing System is one of the 2 English examinations accepted if you're going to the United States of America. So I'm 100% sure you already know that you have to pass 2 examinations if you want to go to the US. So one is nursing exam and the second one is English examination. Now, because you are going to the United States, I want you to know that it is regular academic module that you are supposed to take, okay? General training is not intended for you guys. But just in case you're curious and you want to ask, who are taking the general training module? Those who are applying for fiancé visa. Number 2, spouse visa. Number 3, working visa, but skilled workers like butchers, welders, electricians, linemen, mechanics, and the like. Number 4, those who are migrating to Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. They are the ones who are supposed to take the general training module. But I want you to know that because you are nurses going to the United States of America, it's the academic module that you're supposed to take. Now, a lot of people are asking, what's the difference between academic and general training? One thing is for sure, academic and general training candidates have exactly the same listening, writing task 2, and speaking. So there are slight differences in the reading subjects and writing task 1 portion. So academic passages in reading are longer, maximum of 1,500 words per passage, usually 2 pages. What about the general training passages? Relatively shorter at maximum of 750 words, and most of the time that's just 1 page. Now, knowing that this is the situation, a lot of people are asking which one is easier. Is it academic or general training? Well, even Cambridge would admit that general training is the easier module. It's just that in the IELTS, you cannot take the wrong module. The moment you take the wrong module, you are required to repeat all the 4 subjects of the IELTS. Now, what if you're telling me, I'm a nurse going to America, but I heard that general training is easier. Can I take GT instead? The answer is no. I repeat, you have to stick to the academic module. Now, what about writing task 1? Because GT is easier, it's letter writing. But for the academic candidates, it's statistical writing. You'll be provided with a line graph, bar graph, pie chart table, and based on this graph, you're supposed to write at least 150 words. I'm sure most of us have tried letter writing, but not too many of us have the opportunity to write a statistical report. Exactly why academic is considered to be the more challenging module. So I repeat, it is more challenging, but not necessarily difficult, especially because preparation is the key. If there are coaches willing to help you out in preparation for the examination, then I believe that nothing is insurmountable. So we're done with the first slide. You already know that you're supposed to take IELTS, and it's the academic module. Now, let us move on to the 2 testing centers. Worldwide, there are 3 testing centers. So Cambridge, the owner of the examination. Right now, IELTS is co-owned by 3 institutions. So option number 2 and option number 3, the British Council, and number 3, IDP Education Pty Limited. For those who are asking, what is the meaning of IDP? That is International Development Program. Now, I need you to check your location because there are certain countries with British Council and IDP at the same time. It's just that there are certain locations like China. China only has British Council as an option. There is no IDP in China. Also, there are certain locations where only IDP is the testing center and there is no British Council. So it's important that we asked earlier where the candidates are from, because knowing that there are reviewees from other countries, it might be best to check first within that particular country which testing centers are available. Now, for those of you who are taking the examination here in the Philippines, the main office of British Council is located in BGC, that's in Taguig, whereas IDP is located in Ortigas. Now, before we move on to the next slide, I'd like to answer a very controversial question. Like what I've said, I don't want to waste your time. That is why I promise you will hear new information that you're going to learn for the very first time tonight, even if you've already prepared for your examination before. So a lot of people are asking, which testing center offers the easier IELTS exam? Is it British Council or IDP? For the record, I want you to know that British Council and IDP are not the ones making the test paper. As I've mentioned earlier, it is Cambridge, the owner of the examination, making the test paper. What then is the function of British Council and IDP? They are like distributors. So let us compare Ministop and 7-Eleven to British Council and IDP. What about, let's say, IELTS? Let's compare IELTS to C2. So if you go to Ministop, the C2 that you're going to purchase there is exactly the same C2 that you're going to buy when you go to 7-Eleven. It's just that, why is it that some people prefer British Council over IDP and vice versa? Well, you have to consider number 1, location. This is exactly the reason why I'm indicating it here. Because say, for instance, you live in Makati. So BGC is more accessible. So people from the south usually consider British Council. Now, say, for instance, you live in Kamanava area. IDP is more accessible because it's located in Ortigas. So that is one factor why people consider one testing center over another. Number 2, if you are taking the examination in the province, there are certain areas that only IDP is administering the exam, and there are certain localities where only British Council is conducting the examination. At the same time, the availability of testings. Say, for instance, in the city of Bacolod, it's not as if IDP and British Council go there every month to conduct the examination. So you have to check the schedule. Say, for instance, January, it's IDP that will conduct the test there. February, it's British Council. March, it's IDP. April, it's British Council, and so on. Now, I want you to know that the basis in deciding for which testing center is not the level of difficulty, because they use exactly the same materials. That is why I need you to consider other factors like accessibility, availability of test day, but please not the level of difficulty, because British Council and IDP Education Pty Limited are using exactly the same test paper. So I hope that it will put an end to the fallacy, the myth that one testing center offers the easier examination as compared to the other. So that's one way to keep the interest of the candidates for tonight, because I promise that you will hear new information that you've never heard before. Now, let us move on to the next slide. By the way, if you have questions, please reserve all of them later on. I need you to jot them down. We're going to have 2 Q&As. The first one after the written exams, that's listening, reading, and writing. Then we're going to devote the second half of our lecture for the speaking subjects. But why speaking? I'm 100% sure you already know by now that speaking is the only subject that matters if you're going to the United States of America. And you know what, guys? You made the right option of considering USA. Why? The 6 countries that require an English examination are US, UK, Ireland, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. And the truth of the matter is, all other countries require a specific band score in all 4 subtests. Say, for instance, Australia and New Zealand need you to get a 7 in listening, reading, writing, and speaking. The United Kingdom wants you to get a 7 in listening, a 7 in reading, 6.5 in writing, and a 7 in speaking. What about Ireland? 6.5 in listening and reading, a 7 in writing and speaking. But what is the good news that you are targeting? The United States of America. USA is only interested in your speaking grade, and that has to be 7. And what about overall band score? 6.5. The question is, what grade are you supposed to get in listening, reading, and writing in order for you to get a 6.5 overall band score? Well, it is safe if you get 6 in listening, 6 in reading, 6 in writing, a 7 in speaking, because that will give you 6.5 overall band score. Now, some people are asking, now, sir, what if I was not able to finish my writing subjects? Most likely, I'm going to get a grade of 5 for that. Can I still go to the United States of America even if my writing grade is 5? The answer is yes, as long as the overall band score is 6.5. So what is the suggestion? Listening, reading, writing, and speaking must help each other in getting the 6.5 overall band scores. I'll give you alternative combinations. Say, for instance, if you get 6.5 in listening, 6 in reading, 5.5 in writing, and a 7 in speaking, the overall is still 6.5. Now, I'd like to give you another combination. Listening 6.5, reading 6.5, writing 5, speaking 7, the overall band is still 6.5. Now, why is it that you are fortunate, guys? USA understands that when you're going to work in the American hospital, you're not going to write an essay. USA knows that while you're working in the ER or in the OR, and say, for instance, your doctor will tell you, nurse, can I have the forceps, please? Obviously, you're not going to say this to your doctor. Hello, doctor. The line graph shows the unemployment rate in UK in 1900. Overall, there was an increase. Or say, for instance, you're performing a procedure. Obviously, when you are when you're working in the hospital, you're not going to say something like, I agree that technology is beneficial for the society. The advantages of technology are blah, blah, blah. The point being, you do not need to go through the rigors of preparing much for the writing subjects because you are targeting the United States of America. So now, let's take a look at the 4 subtests in the IELTS. Written exams, listening, reading, writing, they're always conducted in that order. Listening being the easiest of them all is considered the warm-up round. Now, what about the speaking subtest? It is the speaking subtest which is not conducted together with the written examination. And why? What is the explanation? Well, it's very simple. Well, you have to understand that everyone gets to listen, read, write all at the same time. But obviously, not everyone gets to talk all at the same time. That is why there is a specific schedule for the candidates in the speaking subtest. Now, the question is, when is the speaking subtest? Let us take a look at the two options: pen and paper IELTS versus computer delivered IELTS. So, the promise of British Council Philippines and IDP Philippines, if you're going to take the computer delivered IELTS, you get to finish all the 4 subtests in one day. How does this work? If you choose the morning session for the written exams, definitely you're going to have the speaking subtest in the afternoon. Now, if you choose the afternoon session for the written exams, 100% sure you get to have the speaking subtest in the morning. So this is an advantage for people who are working. Why? You just have to file for a leave for just one day because you get to finish all the 4 subtests in one day. The question is, which particular cities in the Philippines offer the computer delivered IELTS? So definitely Metro Manila. We're in Metro Manila, IDP's office located in Ortigas, and then British Council's office located in BGC. Number 2, Metro Cebu, heart of Cebu City. And number 3, British Council also offers computer delivered IELTS in Baguio City. As of now, IDP is not conducting computer delivered IELTS yet in Baguio. I'm sorry for the people in Mindanao, people like me from Mindanao, we do not have the computer delivered IELTS yet, although it's in the pipeline. Now, what about the speaking subtest if you are taking the pen and paper IELTS? So you have to consider the number of candidates taking the examination. FYI, in Metro Manila, pen and paper IELTS conducted 4 times a month. So what's the schedule? 3 Saturdays and 1 Thursday. Now, if you're going to have the written exams on Saturday, when do we expect the speaking subtest? Usually the day before, same day, or Friday. That means to say it could be Friday or Saturday or Sunday. Now, if ever the written exams fall on Thursday, that means to say your speaking could be Wednesday or Thursday or Friday. That is why I'm giving you an idea as early as now in order for you to plan your schedule. Are you supposed to file for leave for just 1 day or 3 days? As I have mentioned, everyone listens, reads, and writes together. Now, what time is the written exams for pen and paper IELTS? It would usually last for about 3 hours. The registration starts at 8 a.m. and then 9 a.m. to 12 noon. That's for the examination proper. But what about the speaking subtest? Well, in the Philippines, there are 35 IELTS examiners, and I'm fortunate enough that I have encountered 20 of them in my last 14 years of teaching IELTS. So the question is, when is the schedule of the speaking subtest? One IELTS examiner interviews up to 25 candidates in one day. The earliest possible start of the speaking subtest is 8 a.m. One IELTS candidate is allotted maximum of 20 minutes for the interview. One thing is for sure, there are breaks in between. So imagine if 25 candidates are interviewed by one examiner in one day, what could possibly be the last speaking test for the day? That's 9:40 to 10 p.m. You heard me right, I said p.m. So if ever you receive a phone call coming from either IDP or the British Council informing you that your speaking is scheduled at 9:40 to 10 p.m., well, you might correct the person you're talking to over the phone, and you might tell this person, wait a minute, do you mean 9:40 in the morning? No, that is really the last speaking test for the day at 9:40 to 10 p.m. With that in mind, I'm 100% sure you're thinking of 2 things. Like number 1, when will you find out your schedule in speaking? And number 2, how are you supposed to receive the speaking confirmation? Remember, If you're taking the examination in IDP, they are not going to send you any hard copy of your confirmation, but they are going to send it via email. Class, check not just your inbox. You have to check your spam folder because sometimes what's wrong with Gmail and Yahoo Mail? They decide which one is spam and which one is the more important email. When sometimes the more important email enters the spam folder or the unnecessary email is the one that enters the main inbox. Class, if you're taking the examination in British Council, expect that you're not going to receive an email, no hard copy of the confirmation, but primarily you're going to receive a phone call. That's option number one. In the event that you're not able to answer the phone call, when they called, that's the only time they will send you a text message. So let's have a recap. How are you supposed to receive your confirmation in speaking if you're taking the test in IDP? The answer is via email. Now, if you're taking the examination in British Council, the two options for you to receive your speaking confirmation, either phone call or text message. Now, moving on to the second question. When are you expected to receive this one? Well, the answer is 5 days before the written exams. So, I have not memorized the test dates for this year, but I'll give you an example. Say, for instance, August 30. That's the test date that we have chosen. What if by August 25, 5 days before the written exam, still you have not received any confirmation? This is when I need you to coordinate with IDP or British Council because you're supposed to receive your confirmation in speaking 5 days before the written exams. Okay, so now I have given you an idea regarding the schedule of listening, reading, writing. Collectively, they are known as the written exams and the speaking subtests. Now it's time for us to move on to the next slide. Okay, let's talk about listening. So listening is the first subtest in the written exams, and this is further subdivided into 4 sections of varying difficulty. Now, what do we mean when we say varying? Expect that the first section is considered the easiest, and the fourth section the most challenging of them all. So what is the expectation? As sections progress, the difficulty also increases. Now, there are 10 points for each section. If you're going to sum up all 4 of them, the grand total in the listening subtest is 40 points. What about time limit? Let's divide this into 2. 30 minutes for you to listen to the recording and answer the questions. And at the same time, you're given 10 extra minutes to transfer the answers from the booklet to the answer sheet and review your work. Take note that this for pen and paper IELTS. It's just that for computer-delivered IELTS, I hope that you should have known by now that the test supervisor will not provide you with scratch papers or pen. There are certain test supervisors who are a little more considerate and provide scratch paper and pencil to the candidates. It's just that not all of them do that. So if you choose the computer-delivered IELTS, then the question is, how many minutes are you given after the recording? Some test supervisors only give you 2 minutes to review your work before proceeding to the reading subtest. Now, some people are asking, is 2 minutes enough to review your work? Well, the truth of the matter is there's nothing much you can do because you don't have a piece of paper with you. You encode the answers directly on the screen. Now, what about the passing score? If we go back to what we talked about earlier, I have repeatedly mentioned that USA is just interested in your speaking and overall band score. That means to say you are not required a definite band score in listening if you're going to the United States of America. But now, instead of asking for the passing score, some of you might be thinking, what is the safe score in listening? So remember, if you're targeting 6.5 overall band score and a 7 in speaking, it is best that you aim for 6 in listening, 6 in reading, and 6 in writing. So what is the equivalent raw score? Class, 6.0, the equivalent of that is roughly 24 to 26 over 40. But why am I using the term roughly? Why can't I give you a definite score? That is because band score equivalents in IELTS are not fixed. Now, Kindly listen to this one. The easier the material, the band score equivalents become higher. But if the material becomes more difficult, then that's the time band score equivalents become lower. So say for instance, what if after the examination you're telling yourself, oh, that was a very easy examination. I'm 100% sure that I'm going to make it. Well, not quite. That's because the equivalent of 6, if it is an easy material, is 26 over 40. But what if after the listening subtest, you feel down, you feel depressed, saying, that was very challenging. I did not expect that to be that difficult. Well, nothing much to worry about because that's when band score equivalents are adjusted. That's when 24 is safe. So at least now that should give you an idea. If you're able to get 24 to 26 correct answers out of 40 points, then aha, you're safe in listening. You're good to go to the United States of America. Well, as I've mentioned earlier, listening is the warm up. Why is this considered to be the easiest of them all? For several reasons. Number one, you're not going to write an essay in listening. Number two, you're not going to talk. What's most important in listening, you just have to take note of the answers. And now, I need you to know that in the listening subjects, all answers will be mentioned by the speaker. So all you have to do is to take note all of the answers. But obviously, IELTS is not a giveaway. Why are they going to require you to pass an English examination if everyone will make it? I repeat, not everyone will pass the IELTS. That is why they are setting a standard. So now, even if this is the easiest subtest, the question is, what are the problems in the listening subtest? Okay, number one, you have to multitask. So what are the things that you're supposed to do all at the same time? Your eyes must be very busy in reading the questions and looking at the details in the test booklet. Number two, your ears must be paying attention to the details because you don't get to hear the recording the second time around. If you missed it, you totally missed it. You cannot get 9.0 in listening anymore. And then number three, your hands must be very busy in taking note of the details. So imagine your eyes, your ears, your hands, all of them are performing a specific task during the listening subtest. Now, what about the other problems? Let me mention accent and number two, speed. So what about accent? Apparently, accent pertains to manner of delivery, and that is usually affected by the native tongue. So let's talk about the different accents in English. Class, what is the number one misconception of people? They are thinking, because IELTS is owned by Cambridge, for sure, it is only the British accent coming out in the listening subtest. Class, that is a big misconception. That is a fallacy. Why? Let us go back to the acronym IELTS. What is the meaning of the letter I? That's international, which means to say IELTS listening subtest is a combination of accents all over the world. You will hear native and non-native accents in the IELTS. So do not be surprised if you hear an Asian, like a Chinese, an Indian, an Arab, or you're going to hear a Latino, a European, an African talking in English, but with their respective local accent. Now, what about the native accent? Apparently, there's American accent, there is British accent, Australian accent, Canadian accent, and so on. Again, do not focus on the British accent because IELTS is supposed to be a combination of as many accents that they can possibly showcase in a listening subtest. Knowing that this is the concern, what about the things that you're supposed to do in order to be familiar with the accent? I need you to expose yourself. That is exactly why part of the review that we are doing, we inform the candidates of the nuances, the differences in the delivery of certain words. Say, for instance, class, we Filipinos sound a lot like the Americans. Why? Because we live in a former American colony. Almost everything in the Philippines is American, and Filipinos with good English usually have the American accent. That is why we, like the Americans, say schedule. But then again, in Britain, that is schedule. Or we Filipinos like to say potato, but in Britain, that is potato. We Filipinos love to say vase like the Americans. But what about the people in Britain? They're fond of saying boss. That is why during the lectures, we inform the candidates that certain words are delivered in this manner in different parts of the globe. Now, let's compare American versus Australian accent. Class, we Filipinos usually say today, but in Australia, that is to die. We Filipinos love to say yesterday, but in Australia, that is yes to die. Class, if we are to mention their national greeting in the local accent, most likely we are going to say good day, mate. It's just that in Australia, the locals never say good day, mate. They say g'day, mate. Because Australians are fond of shortcuts. So what shortcuts am I talking about? Let us consider McDonald's. As Filipinos, what do we call McDonald's? We usually say McDo. But in Australia, they have their local term for that, and they call McDonald's as Macca's. In Australia, they do not say television, but they say telly. They do not say window, but they say windy. And then they do not say umbrella, but they say brolly. I also want you to know that Aussies have their own slang terms. Say, for instance, avo. Avo means afternoon. Now let us consider 4:30 p.m. We Filipinos and even Americans say 4:30 p.m. But do not be shocked in the listening recording if you hear a speaker saying half past 4 in the avo. So what is the meaning of half past 4? That's 4:30 in the avo in the afternoon. So 4:30 p.m., half past 4 in the avo in the listening recording. So nuances like that are the ones that we discuss in class. Do not expect that we go to the basics like class, what is a noun? What is a pronoun? Obviously, you're not elementary pupils. You're not going to waste 4,000 pesos for your review if you're only going back to things that even your grade school kids already know. What we're teaching in class is something that most likely you need to know as test taking strategies, not just to pass, but to ace the examination. Now, what about New Zealand? I'm 100% sure you know that New Zealand exists as a country. We know a lot of Americans. We know a lot of British. We know a few Aussies. Like Hugh Jackman is Australian, and Nicole Kidman is Australian. Thor, Chris Hemsworth is also Aussie. But what about the most famous people from New Zealand? Some of you might say Jason Momoa. He might have Kiwi descent, but he actually did not live there his entire life. So now, the point being, how do locals of New Zealand talk? I'll give you an example. I have a counterpart in Auckland, Mora, and then we talk to each other from time to time. Now, I need you to pay attention to how she mentions certain words in New Zealand. Say for instance, I need you to listen to this one. Number 1, Denmark. Number 2, Finland. And number 3, Czech Republic. Okay, one by one, let's identify which countries she is pertaining to. Obviously, Denmark is our Denmark. And then number 2, Finland is our Finland. Number 3, Czech Republic is our Czech Republic. So what is it that you've noticed in New Zealand? I becomes E and E becomes I. So class, if that is the case, listen to what I've said earlier. I did not say Kiwi, but I said Kiwi, because that's how the locals of New Zealand call themselves. Now, what about Canadian accent? I'm 100% sure everyone knows where Canada is. and that is located north of the United States of America. So USA and Canada are neighbors. No wonder why Americans and Canadians sound a lot like each other. It's just that there are certain words delivered differently in Canada. Say, for instance, a boot. And what is about? That is that is their version of about. So say for instance, you hear an American sounding person saying, oh, you know what? I have no idea what you're talking about. About is apparently our about. So it is cases like these that we discuss in the lecture in order for our students to be totally prepared. We provide you with the arsenal, what you need to know in preparation for your examination. So unfamiliarity with the accent is one problem. What about the last problem? I think it is something to do with speed. And what are the two possible contexts of speed? Number one, some speakers talk too fast. It might be difficult to catch up with what they are saying. Or number two, some speakers don't talk too fast, but there is a tendency for them to give the answers one after another. So knowing that, here are the problems in the listening subtest. Number one, there's you must multitask. And then number two, you don't get to hear the recording the second time around. That means to say you have to focus. Why? For most of us, we are mentally preoccupied. Say, for instance, right now, you're supposed to be in the IELTS Masterclass, but who knows if some of you are already thinking of other things in mind. Say, for instance, you might be nodding while you're listening to me, but you're already thinking, what am I going to eat for dinner after this webinar? Or what am I supposed to watch on Netflix later? Again, you have to fight short attention span in the listening subjects. But what about accent and speed? What are the main tips to address these potential problems? I believe it is exposure. Why? So that the next time around, when you hear a speaker saying H in the recording, then you would recognize, the speaker is actually pertaining to the letter H. Or if ever you hear the speaker saying Z or Z, at least the next time around, you already know, the speaker actually means Z. Exposure is very important. So what is my suggestion for you guys? I need you to keep on playing your listening recordings all day long. You heard me right, all day long, even if you are not answering the practice tests. Why? This is the simple logic. If you don't want to look at something, it's possible to do that. Why? All you have to do is to close your eyes. You can't see it anymore because we have eyelids in order for us not to see. But if you don't want to hear something, you don't have a choice. Why? Because you don't have earlids. Your ears are open all the time, so whether you like it or not, you'll really hear that information. So say, for instance, when you are doing the laundry, what must be your background music? Play. Listening test 1. This is a practice listening test which resembles the International English Language Testing System. Or say, for instance, you are cooking, you're preparing the ingredients. Then what is your background music? Play. Section 1. You will hear a number of different recordings and you have to answer questions on what you hear. It might be funny, but I'd like to emphasize you have to be exposed. That is step number 1. When you are exposed, then you become familiar, and that's when listening will be a breeze. During the review proper, we devote 3 hours of our time talking about the listening subjects, but in this master class, we're attempting to finish listening, reading, and writing in 1 hour, and then the remaining subjects, speaking the other half of our discussion. So hopefully, it will give you an idea not just to focus on the British accent, but to expose yourself to as many accents as you can. And fight short attention span, you have to focus in order for you to take note of all the answers. Why? The moment you get that 9 in listening, you can announce to the whole wide world, hey, I am a 9. Well, not everyone can tell their friends, excuse me, I got a 9 in the examination. So now we're done with the listening portion. Let us move on to reading. Okay, before that, let me just drink water. By the way, if you want to do something quickly, please do not say for a while. Why? The problem with for a while means it would take quite some time. So if you want to do something quickly, what are you supposed to say? Your options are just a moment, wait a minute, hold on a second, or I'll be back in a jiffy. Having said that, I'll just drink water. I'll be back in a jiffy. I promise it's not going to take long. So now let's talk about the reading subtest. Class, it is divided into 3 passages. Academic passages, maximum of 1,500 words per passage. Now, how many points per passage? 13 to 14 points, roughly. So if you're going to combine all the points for all 3 passages, that's 40 points. But what's the difference between listening and reading? In listening, you're given a different time to listen and answer, and another extra minutes for you to transfer the answers and review your work. But in the reading subject, everything is incorporated in 1 hour. In 1 hour, you're supposed to answer, you're supposed to transfer and review your work. Now, let's talk about the time management in the reading subtest. So here we go. Simple mathematics would dictate 60 minutes divided by 3 passages, 20 minutes per passage. It's just that. That's not what 9.09er suggests. Why? Imagine if you're going to devote exactly 20 minutes per passage, you don't have time anymore to review your work, and number 2, transfer your answers to the test book, rather to the answer sheet. So what is my suggestion? 15 minutes for each passage. Why? So that you have the remaining 15 minutes to, number 1, review your work, and number 2, transfer your answers from the test booklet to the answer sheet. That is, if you're taking the pen and paper IELTS. Because for computer delivered IELTS, you don't have to transfer your answers anymore because everything is encoded directly to the computer. Now, 15 minutes for 1 passage. Again, how many points are there for 1 passage? 13 to 14 points. Exactly the reason why I do not want you to spend more than 1 minute in answering 1 question. I just don't get it. I just cannot fathom why some people prioritize difficult questions over easy questions, because this is what they're thinking of. Difficult questions are more important than easy questions. I am sorry, but that is wrong. Why? Whether it's easy or difficult, they're both worth 1 point. So imagine spending 5 minutes of your time answering 1 question and your answer is wrong. Imagine you could have used the 5 minutes in answering 5 other easier questions. So what is my suggestion? The moment you feel you're taking so much time in answering 1 question, stop doing that. You answer the question using gut feel. What you think is right. And then you put an asterisk mark. What is the purpose of the asterisk mark? To remind yourself that you are not yet sure of your answer, that you have to go back to this later on. It's just that I hope you're not going to write an asterisk mark on all 40 items. Why? Well, obviously, it defeats the purpose of answering. It defeats the purpose if you're going to write an asterisk mark for all 40 points if all of them have exactly the same mark. So now, let's take a look at the passing score. Once again, USA is not requiring you to get a fixed band score in the reading subtest. But let's recall, what is the safe band score in reading? If you're going to America, we suggest 6.0. And out of 40 points, how many correct answers are you supposed to get? To get 6 in reading, that's 24 to 26 correct answers. Now, what about the main problems in the reading subtest? Number 1, comprehension. Class, I just don't get it. That in most of the Facebook posts, you will notice that the sponsor or the author is already providing all the details there. And then I see a lot of Filipinos typing how. I mean, are you kidding me? All the details are already there, and yet you're asking how. That is the problem with the Filipinos according to the IELTS big bosses in Asia. Filipinos know English. We are talkative, but we do not read. Or we read, but we refuse to understand. Remember, English is not limited to speaking.
English communication includes reading. The others are able to read without comprehension. Now, why is it that people love to ask? That's because they're too lazy to read. I want you to know that reading and comprehension, this is an important skill in the IELTS. So what is my suggestion for you guys? Before you ask a question, especially if there is a passage or a pamphlet or a flyer provided to you, try not to ask any question. Try to understand what you are reading. Try to find the answer there first before you ask a question. That will force yourself to understand. Because the problem in the reading subtest, the words in the passage are totally different from the words the in the questions. So you have to build your vocabulary. At least you would know that this word and that word, they're actually related and they mean exactly the same thing. Now, another problem in the reading subtest, the passages are just long. Once again, how many words per passage? Maximum of 1,500. Class, what some people do not understand, they are not entirely aware of the objective in the reading subjects. Now, I need you to ask yourselves, number one, what is the most important objective in reading? Is it, number one, to enjoy what you are reading? Say, for instance, ang saya-saya naman itong passage na to. Number two, what is the objective in reading? Is it to understand all the words in the passage? The answer is no. Common sense dictates maximum of 1,500 words in one passage. But how many answers do you need in one passage? Just 13 to 14 points. FYI, in reading, there are more details that you do not need as compared to the details that you need. Number three, what some people do, they're trying to understand a specific sentence when in fact that sentence does not contain any answer at all. So how would you know if there is an answer in this specific portion of the passage? Class, let me share with you my personal tip when I took the IELTS. Class, I took the IELTS twice. So one IELTS in IDP and one IELTS in British Council. So for my first IELTS, I took the examination in British Council. That's when I got 8.5 in reading. And then for my second IELTS, when I took the test in IDP, that's when I got 9.0 in reading. Now, I have to be honest, for someone like me, a very talkative person, I do not want to read. But it doesn't mean that I'm going to fail the reading subtest. That is because I know what I'm supposed to do. So here are the most important tips I'd like to share for everyone. In the reading subtest, number one, read the questions first. Because that will allow you to filter which information to absorb and which information to disregard. If you're only looking for 13 to 14 answers in the entire passage, then you do not need to understand every single detail. So, to give you an idea on what specific information you're supposed to find in the passage, what are you supposed to do first? Read the questions. Then, number two, after reading the questions, that's when I need you to read the entire passage. I have read a lot of IELTS books and they say, don't read everything, just skim and scan. My argument is, if you don't read everything, then how will you know that the answer to a specific question is not given? That is problematic. Why? For most people, this is what they are thinking of. IELTS reading is challenging because of two main questions, matching headings and true false not given. So let's focus on true false not given because that's the one that I have mentioned. What is high schoolish true or false type of question? You're provided with a statement and you're supposed to identify, is this true or false? In IELTS, it's somewhat like that. It's just that there is a third option, which is not given. Now, how do you know that something is not given? You have to read everything in the passage because that's the only way for you to know that indeed something is not given. Why? You can confidently say, I'm sure it's not mentioned in the passage because I've read it entirely. Clarification. I said you read the entire passage, but I did not say force yourself to understand every single word in the passage. You're just supposed to force yourself to understand the items that contain answers, but you do not need to understand every single word. That's exactly what I'm saying. Now, while you are reading the passage, I need you to answer the questions at the same time. Why? Imagine you're fishing and then you're able to get a good catch. What are you supposed to do with that fish? Are you supposed to throw it away back into the ocean, or are you supposed to get it and keep it for yourself? Obviously, you're going to keep it. It's like when you find gold. The moment you find gold, you don't let go of it anymore. You want it to be a part of you. So this is why in the reading subtest, the moment you're able to find an answer in the passage, stop reading. Go to the question to answer that question so that you don't have to go back to this portion anymore later on. In fact, I promise that even before you reach the last sentence of the passage, you've answered all the questions already. Why? It is impossible that every last sentence of each passage contains an answer. Answers obviously are spread all throughout the text. So let's have a recap. In the reading subjects, what are you supposed to do first? Read all the questions to give you an idea which info to focus on and which info to disregard. After reading all the questions, now you already know which specific information to find. That's when you read not just certain portions of the passage, but you read the entire passage, because that's the only way for you to know if something is not given. And number three, while you are reading the questions, the moment you find an answer, you go to that question right away to answer that, so that later you don't have to think of that question anymore simply because you've answered it already. Now, for true, false, not given, I want you to know that the answers are found chronologically in the passage 99% of the time. So say, for instance, numbers 1 to 7, they are the true, false, not given questions. Where are you going to find the answer for number 1? For sure, in the first part. If not in the first paragraph, it could be in the second paragraph. But one thing is for sure, you will never find the answer for true, false, not given in, rather, true, false given question number 1 in the last paragraph. Class, if number 7 is the last true, false, not given question, where are you supposed to find the answer in the passage? It could be towards the end, could be the second to the last paragraph, could be the last paragraph, but it's impossible that all last sentences of each passage contains an answer. What if you've answered number 1, you've answered number 3, but class, something is fishy. You've answered 1, you've answered 3, but now you have not answered number 2 yet. What does that mean? You probably missed the answer to number 2. So what are you supposed to do? You go back to the portion in the passage that contains the answer for number 1 and number 3. And then in between, go back to find the answer for number 2. But what if you were able to go back to that portion in between 1 and 3 in the passage and the answer for number 2 is still not there? I can look at you straight in the eye, for he who is innocent is as brave as the lion. The answer for number 2 is not given. Class, sometimes you don't have to finish the entire passage for you to know that something is not given. You just have to look at what's in between 1 and 3. And if the answer for number 2 is not there, I tell you, it's not given without having to finish the entire passage. The usual time that I allot for the discussion of the reading subjects is 3 hours. But since this is an IELTS Masterclass, trying to talk about everything in just 2 hours, I hope that with that brief portion of our reading discussion, I was able to enlighten you as you move forward on what you're supposed to do and not supposed to do in the reading subtest. So now, let us go to the most challenging subtest if you are going to UK or Ireland or Australia or New Zealand. But you are fortunate enough, guys, that you are targeting the United States of America, because US is not really interested in whatever score you get in the writing subtest. So now, I am telling you, you picked the right destination, the United States of America. So before we talk about statistical writing and essay writing, once again, let me just sip water very briefly. Okay, let's focus on the writing subtest. So let's forget about general training writing task one. Task one for academic statistical writing and task two for academic candidates essay writing. Writing task one, you're supposed to write at least 150 words. Writing task two, at least 250 words. Now, the moment you fail to reach the minimum number of words, expect a penalty. And what penalty I'm talking about? The examiner will give you a grade of 5.0 for task achievement and task response. That is the first criterion. Why are you given a grade of 5? That's because your work is under length. Now, in writing, I need you to be familiar with the number of minutes allotted for the entire subtest. So if you look at the instruction in the actual test booklet, it says that you're given 20 minutes for task one, you're given 40 minutes for task two. It's just that. Test supervisors do not necessarily follow that in the actual examination. So what do test supervisors do? They give you 1 hour to finish both task one and task two, regardless of the time that you spent for each task. So whether it's 30 minutes for each, it really doesn't matter. What's most important, both of them are completed in 1 hour. Now, what about the value of task one? Task one, 33% of your grade. Task two, 66% of your grade. So now, if I may ask you, which task are you supposed to prioritize in the actual examination? Answer is writing task two. Why? Because the value of task two is twice as much as the value of your task one. That is why 9.09 recommends that in the actual examination, you start with writing task two. So that when you finish task two, your only remaining problem is task one. Now, what if you are not able to finish task one? Then you expect a deduction for that. But kindly compare the deduction when you finish task one, but you are not able to finish task two. The deduction is twice as much. That is why for everyone to know, start the actual examination with writing task two. Now, what about the passing score? I've repeatedly mentioned since 6 p.m. USA is not interested in whatever band score you get in writing, but I need you to target 6.0 for this particular subtest. Okay, what about the main problems? Well, even if this is not the subtest that matters most to you, some people would still like to get a 7 in writing. Not for any reason, but for personal gratification, for self-bragging rights. So December 1 to 5, 2017, I was sent to Shanghai, China to participate in the International Conference for English Language Assessment. During the conference, I was the only Filipino representing all the review centers in the country, and I met the two big bosses of IELTS in Asia, Dr. Victoria Clark and Dr. Joanna Moran. They compared the performance of the East Asians and the Filipinos in the writing subtest. So let's begin with the East Asians. Who are the East Asians? Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, Taiwanese, and the citizens of Hong Kong and Macau. For the East Asians, they usually get below average grades for English, knowing that English is a new language that they've learned recently. That's why up until now, they're having a difficult time in identifying the plural form of this particular noun or the past tense of this particular verb, or they do not know when to use this kind of preposition. But you have to understand the East Asians taking the IELTS are the smart East Asians. They are not the commoners. So they get above average grades for content because usually they are the ones who would like to pursue further education overseas. So for East Asians, below average grades for English, above average grades for content. But what about the Filipinos, according to Dr. Victoria Clark and Dr. Joanna Moran? I guess you already know where this discussion is headed for, but still, let's discuss it anyway. Filipinos usually get above average grades for English, knowing that English is no longer a foreign language in this country. Well, let's admit it. We've been talking in English since birth, and some of us are even better in English than our national language, which is Tagalog. That is especially true for people like us coming from the South. Why? We Bisaya people would rather speak in English because at home we speak in straight Bisaya and in school we speak in straight English. And there are not too many opportunities for us to use Tagalog as part of our day-to-day conversation. That's why we're more comfortable in English than in Tagalog. The problem is, even if Filipinos get above average grades for English, we're not able to use this and maximize this to our advantage because Filipinos usually get below average grades for content. Why? According to Dr. Victoria Clark and Dr. Joanna Molina, the answers of certain Filipinos in the writing subtest are not on point. English might be correct, but answers are not responsive to the question. So I want you to take the writing subject seriously if you are targeting a 7 in writing. And what is the best tip I'd like to share with you as early as now? Read, read to feed your mind. Why? There is nothing substantive to write. And in the first place, there is nothing in here. So I repeat, keep on reading. But what specific topics are you supposed to read? During the review proper, we give an idea to the candidates which specific topics commonly come out in the writing subjects. You know what is the good news? In IELTS, questions are recycled. They come out again and again and again. So we give them the questions ahead of time in order for them to prepare for these questions such that if that specific question comes out in the examination, they don't panic anymore. All they do is just to write the answer that they prepared for beforehand. Remember, nothing is impossible, nothing is insurmountable if you know what to expect in the actual examination. And that is what you're paying for. Teachers who are not just teachers of English, but teachers who have been doing this for the longest time. Perhaps modesty aside, if you've noticed, since 6 p.m., when I started opening my mouth, I just keep on talking and talking and talking. Notice that I don't hold any cue cards with me. I don't have any script with me. I just open my mouth because this is what familiarity does to you. And mind you, even if, say, for instance, I'm drunk, I can still teach. That is because of familiarity. That's what 14 years of expertise can do. So we give you the handout containing the actual examination questions and the model essays contributed by our lecturers who got 9, 8.5, and 8 in writing in the actual examination. So there's nothing much for me to talk about in the writing subtest. As I checked my phone, it's 7:07 p.m. and the other half will focus on the more important subtest, which is speaking. I promised earlier that after listening, reading, and writing, we're going to accommodate questions. So perhaps let's ask the help of the moderators, the panelists from Health Carousel, how we're going to go about with the question and answer portion. I mean, do I just look at the questions under the Q&A box, or can people like verbally ask the questions? Some of you perhaps can start typing the questions. Hopefully these questions will focus first on listening, reading, and writing. Please do not ask any questions related to the speaking subtest yet, so that we're not going to preempt our discussion for the speaking subtest. Okay?
Hi, Sir Irvin.
Yes, po.
Yeah, I'll be reading the questions for you.
Okay.
So, yeah. So you said not to include speaking related
Yes,
questions.
because the first question I saw here is for
Yeah.
speaking. Yeah, we will answer that later on. Let's
Alright.
not go ahead of ourselves because we already mentioned from the very beginning. That's the reason why we're allotting the other half for speaking, because it's the most important subtest for USA.
Okay, so let me read one here, sir. Are we going to be penalized if we're going to use a combination of US and British English spelling in our listening answers?
Okay. Hi, Miss Evangeline. The answer is yes. Now, this is the fact in IELTS. You're allowed to use American spelling. You're allowed to use British spelling, but you're not supposed to combine both. The moment you start with American spelling, it has to be American from beginning to end. If you start with British spelling, it has to be British from beginning to end. But if I may ask you, which spelling are we Filipinos more familiar with? Well, apparently it's American spelling. So I'd rather that you focus on American spelling. Well, apart from the fact that you're also going to the United States of America. But just to give you an idea, American spelling is not always shorter than British spelling. Why? Let's consider the word traveling. American traveling, that's one L. British traveling, double L. But it doesn't always mean that American always has one L. But for the word enroll, American enroll, double L. British enroll, one L. So again, I need you to be familiar with just one type of spelling. Don't confuse yourself by trying to study both. Anyway, even if you're going to the UK, even if it doesn't matter if you use the American spelling or British spelling. And because we're more familiar with American spelling, let's just stick to that. Okay?
All right, sir. Another question here from Lawrence Dave Amba. So how do the examiners grade the writing test? What are the criteria? Thank you.
Okay, so for the writing subjects, there are 4 criteria. Well, I usually talk about this in detail in the writing major lecture. It's just that it was asked here. So, number 1, earlier I've given you an idea that's task achievement and task response, and this pertains to how well you are able to respond to the question. Were you able to fully and appropriately answer the questions? It's not enough that you're just answering. You have to make sure there is meat, there is content. Remember why Filipinos fail in the writing subject? It's not because of English. It's because of superficial answers. Now, you want to maximize your time in going, you want to maximize your grade in the writing subjects, please focus on content and not English. Rest assured, this is what you're going to hear when you speak to the big bosses of IELTS in Asia. I know this is an English test, but the reason why Filipinos fail in writing is not because of English, but it's content. So focus on content. So that's the first one, task achievement and task response. The second one, coherence and cohesion. It pertains to organization, the flow of your essay. During the major lecture, I focused on the usual number of sentences per paragraph as recommended by IELTS examiner Cindy La Rosa. I also discussed how many paragraphs you're supposed to write in one essay as discussed by IELTS examiner Malcolm Douglas Gamet. And then IELTS examiner Rosella Torrecampo also suggests the use of specific connective words. So these are connective words that will tell you where are you now in your essay? Are you in the beginning? Are you in the middle? Or are you in the end? Because even if your English is right, but there is no specific flow. It is cluttered, not organized, then you are not going to pass the writing subjects. The third and fourth criteria are the ones assessed in both writing and speaking. And number 3, that's vocabulary. Number 4, that's grammar. I'd rather talk about the 2 of them later on during our speaking discussion because like what I've said, vocab and grammar are assessed in both writing and speaking. So we only have 2 hours. That's not much time. So I hope not to be repetitive. I'd rather focus on vocab and grammar later on.
Okay. Would you like to answer more, Sir Irvin?
Pasadahan ko na lang, mabilisan. Is that fine?
Sige po. All right.
Okay, so I'll just have to do the answering. So, anonymous attendee, which one is easier to take, paper-based or computer-based? What is the advantages of computer-based? Okay, it's not as if you're using a different material. They use exactly the same material. So whether it's paper-based or computer-based, it's exactly the same level of difficulty. So I would rather that you ask yourself, which one are you more comfortable with? Are you the kind of person who prefers to have the traditional pen, the traditional paper, or are you technologically savvy with a QWERTY keyboard that you can easily find the letter? Class, I cannot suggest which one is better. I cannot suggest which one is easier to take, but please ask yourself, which one are you more comfortable with? Do you prefer to take it in a computer without any pen, without any paper at all, or are you the kind of person who really needs to have a writing material in front of them? So only you and you can decide which one is better for you. And then, Jonna Galang, can you give the target score for each test? Okay, I've mentioned this as early as 6 p.m., but for the benefit of those who came in late, by the way, I'm just thrilled by the number of attendees. Wow, we started at like, what, 120, and now there are 233 people in class. So, thank you so much, Health Carousel, for inviting your candidates, and I hope that I'm not wasting their time. Now, going back to this question, listening, what is the required band score? Doesn't matter. Reading doesn't matter. Writing doesn't matter because US is just interested in speaking, which is 7, and then overall band score 6.5. But once again, how are you supposed to get a 6.5 overall band score? Simply target a 6 in listening, 6 in reading, 6 in writing. So I'd like to say 6 is the safe band score in LRW, but that's not the required band score. Because even if you get 5 in writing, it's totally fine as long as the other subtests will pull your overall band score up to 6.5. So they just look at speaking and overall band. It doesn't matter what you get for listening, reading, and writing. Now, from Mary Jane Ocampo, tips in paraphrasing the title in writing. Actually, you're not required to write a title anymore. You just have to be on point. You just have to be responsive to the question. It is important you know a lot of words, because with more words in here, you get to avoid copying exactly the same words that are found in the task description. So during the review proper, that's when we will tell you what you're supposed to do with the brainstorming stage, outlining stage, writing stage, editing stage, and so on. And then from Liam, what topics should we read to answer the questions in the writing subjects? Well, usually this is something that I talk about in the major lecture. But for the benefit of answering this question right now, IELTS is conducted 4 times a month in Metro Manila. Computer delivered IELTS every single day, Monday to Sunday, twice a day. That is why I can confidently tell you that in writing, these 3 topics come out every month. Like every single month, there are a lot of topics that focus on education, technology, and culture. So I need you to start reading about technology, culture, and education as early as now, because I expect that all these 3 come out every month. There are those that come out once in 3 months, once in 2 months, and what are these? Topics related to environment, topics related to government. But if you just focus on the first 3, I can confidently tell you that 75% of the time, the actual examination question will just focus on technology, culture, and education. So, how can I strongly write my conclusion in writing task 2? I'd like to remind you, conclusion is not the most important part in writing task 2. What's the most important part? It's the body. How you're able to fully and appropriately answer the question. The conclusion is just there to recap the most important points, but it doesn't mean that you're going to, it doesn't mean that conclusion will make or break your essay. It's the body of the essay that will make you pass the examination. So focus on improving your content rather than coming up with a good closure. Okay, so I'm overwhelmed by the number of questions. It's actually good that you're asking questions. It's just not looking at my time. It's 7:17. If I answer more of these questions, I may not be able to fully focus on the speaking subject, which is the reason why we're actually here for tonight. So can I just answer some of the other questions later on? We have to focus on speaking because this is the most important subject if you're going to the United States of America. Okay, so with the permission of Miss Karen, I'll now proceed to the speaking subtest.
Okay, sir.
Sige po. Speaking. Ay, ba't ay mag-move ng aking screen? One moment. Okay. Baka nagbabuffer lang. One moment. There you go. Okay, speaking subtest. So, I've already mentioned earlier the schedule of the speaking subjects, but for the benefit of those who came in late, if you are going to take the computer-delivered IELTS, speaking is always on the same day as the written exams. If you're going to have written exams in the morning, speaking for computer-delivered IELTS is always in the afternoon. If you're going to choose the afternoon session for the written exams, then speaking subjects is always in the morning. If you're taking pen and paper IELTS, speaking could be the day before, same day, or the day after. Now, pen and paper versus computer-delivered version of the speaking subjects class. When was IELTS invented? IELTS was first introduced in 1989. You heard me right. IELTS is older than some of you. Class, it was just 2 years ago when computer-delivered version was first introduced to the Philippines. So relatively, this is a baby version of the IELTS. So the moment computer-delivered IELTS was introduced to the market, some people are thinking, oh my God, I'm an introvert. I'm shy. I don't want to talk to a human being. I'd rather talk to a computer. Class, I'm sorry, but that is wrong. Why? In IELTS, speaking is the only subtest that remains face to face. That is the only subtest not conducted in front of the computer. Now, I'd like to share something interesting today. Why? Because this is not the usual circumstance. This is COVID-19 pandemic, and it has affected the conduct of the speaking subtest. So if I may just get my props to make it more realistic. Okay, so IDP is already conducting IELTS examination in various cities in the Philippines, but British Council has yet to conduct an IELTS examination since March 16, the start of the lockdown. For some of my reviewees who took the examination recently, yes, I'm letting you know, all the speaking candidates and all the speaking examiners are required to wear a face mask in the actual speaking test. So imagine you're talking to your examiner and yet you're wearing a face mask. Class, apart from the face mask, there is also an acrylic barrier that separates the examiner and the candidate. I know that some of you are soft-spoken. This is the time to remind you, scream at the top of your lungs in the speaking subtest. Why? You already have a face mask and you still have an acrylic barrier in front of you. By the way, the speaking test is recorded. If you know you're soft-spoken, please speak louder. It's not the examiner who is going abroad. You are the one going abroad, so you are the one who needs to adjust. Okay? So let me remove my props. Make sure that these come in handy when you take the examination. Okay, so going back, pen and paper IELTS, pen and paper speaking, computer delivered speaking. Still, you go to the facility of British Council and IDP and talk to the examiner in person. You do not need a computer if you are taking the speaking subtest. Now, for our reviewees who would like to have an assistance for the scheduling of their examination, here are the contact details of Miss Jenna, and that's also the contact details of Niner. So please, you can send her a message. If you're going to call her, please be mindful of the time. Please call her from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Philippine time because Miss Jenna is telling me, sir, yung mga estudyante kasi na nasa Middle East, alas 3 ng madaling araw, tumatawag, nagre-ring yung phone. I hope that you're going to respect the time difference, so please do not call her after 6 p.m. Philippine time. Okay, now let's take a look at the speaking criteria. So one of your classmates earlier asked, what are the 4 criteria assessed in the writing subtest? So as a recap, I said the first one, task achievement and task response, that focuses on content. Number 2, coherence and cohesion, that's the one that focuses on organization and flow. Number 3, vocabulary. Number 4, grammar. So you will notice that for speaking, for the 4 criteria, same third and fourth criterion. But the first 2 are different. So now I'm going to focus on the first criterion. So this one is fluency and coherence. And what is this criterion assessing in the performance of the candidates? This assesses how well you're able to talk naturally, spontaneously, in class while being responsive. Why? IELTS examiners in the Philippines notice that English is no longer foreign language in the Philippines because a lot of Filipinos worldwide are able to communicate freely in English. But the only problem is we are very talkative, but we tend to forget what the question is. Say, for instance, the question is, tell me something about your favorite shop or store. And then other reviewees are saying, oh, my favorite shop or store is Bench, in particular, the one at SM Mega Mall. And you know what? I really love SM Mega Mall. Like, SM Mega Mall is located in Mandaluyong. SM Mega Mall is along EDSA. SM Mega Mall is the biggest in the Philippines. SM Mega Mall is owned by Henry C. By the way, Henry C died recently, and may he rest in peace. Now, let us assess the response of this person. Is the person talkative? Yes. But is the person answering the question? Not anymore. Why? Let's go back to the question. The question is looking for shop or store. But apparently this person focused on Bench. That's acceptable. But later on focused on Mega Mall, and later on focused on Henry C, which are no longer related to the question. I know that some people are forcing themselves to keep on talking and talking and talking. But what happens at the end of the day? No more organization. At the back of their mind, this is what they're thinking of. Bahala na. I just have to keep on talking. But remember, speaking subtest is not just the talking subtest. When you're talking, basically you're just on you're on your own. But when you say speaking, there has to be communication between you and the examiner. So when you are asked, you have to be responsive. You have to avoid off-topic answers. Now, the problem with the performance for the first criterion, some of us are not aware of what's coming out of our mouth. Say, for instance, tell me something about the country you would like to visit in the future. Some people are saying, oh, I'm very excited to visit Dubai. Knock, knock. The last time I checked, Dubai has not yet declared independence from the United Arab Emirates. UAE is the country. Dubai is just an emirate of UAE. So why am I letting you know? Class, even before you utter a word, ask yourself, am I answering the question? Now, a lot of my reviewees ask me, sir, what if I have ums? Will I automatically fail in fluency if I have ums? The answer is no. What are ums anyway? Ums are fillers, an indicator that you are still thinking. So class, when you watch television, what is it that you've noticed? Native English speakers have ums while they're talking in English. We Filipinos also have ums while we're talking in Tagalog. Does that mean we are poor in our own language? The answer is no. But it only means to say we are still thinking. So I keep on reminding the students in the speaking subtest, kindly make sure that you focus on what you are saying, but it doesn't mean you have to be fast. Why? The common misconception is people are thinking that fluency means speed, when in fact that is not true. Remember, the mind is the one thinking of the answer. The mouth is the one delivering the answer. So if you speak too fast, your mouth goes ahead of your brain in thinking of what you're going to say, such that in the end, you get to have so many ums along the way. So now, what are the most important lessons that I need you to keep in mind if you want to do well in the first criterion? Number one, challenge yourself to be the most talkative person in the world, providing as many details as you can, making your answers long. But number two, at the same time, even if you're attempting to be cognitive, you have to stick to the subject matter. Kindly avoid off-topic responses. And number three, you are not required to talk fast. In a nutshell, that's what the first criterion is all about. Now, let's go to criterion number two, and that is pronunciation. So, a lot of people are asking, sir, what is the difference between pronunciation and delivery? Pronunciation pertains to clarity of words as you talk. Well, as I've mentioned earlier, accent pertains to manner of delivery, and that is affected by the native tongue or the regional orientation. Now, let us focus on accent. Is accent important in the speaking subtest? Well, this is my answer. You are not required to have the Native American or British accent to pass the speaking subtest. Well, if you listen to me, I don't sound like an American. I don't sound like a Brit or an Aussie. But even if I don't have a native accent, I was able to get a 9.0 in speaking. Why? Because IELTS examiners are not looking for a native accent. IELTS examiners are simply looking for neutral accent. You have to drop the local accent. So what is your objective? Such that if the examiner closes his or her eyes, the examiner must not know that the person talking is Filipino. Class, I repeat, neutral accent is preferred over native accent. Okay, what about pronunciation? I am delighted by the fact that a lot of Filipinos today really pronounce well. But what is the problem? There are also some of us with poor pronunciation. They are those who are said to have some speech defects, if you get what I'm saying. Why? It's very common to encounter people who interchange F and B and V, T and TH. But why? This is simply because some people don't open their mouth as much when they talk. Class, you have to understand that words are just air coming out of your mouth. Try to do this randomly while you're talking. Keep on talking and then all of a sudden cover your mouth. You will realize there's air coming out of your mouth. Like what I said, words are just air. If you want the words to come out freely, open your mouth. Well, as an IELTS reviewer in the last 13 years, I am no stranger to criticisms. A lot of people are saying, "Ba't ganyan siya magsalita? Parang matatanggal na yung panga niya pag nagsasalita siya." You know what? I don't give a damn. I do not care what other people think. Because at the end of the day, regardless of what you do, other people will always have something to say. I'd like you to remind yourself you're doing it for yourself. You're not doing it for the others. I don't mind if you open your mouth. What's most important, you're able to pronounce the words clearly. Don't think of what other people have to say. You focus on what you're supposed to do. And now you know that in the speaking subjects, the secret in clear pronunciation or clarity of words is for you to open your mouth. Now, what about the ideal delivery in the speaking subtest? Do not visualize the speaking subtest as a formal interview. In fact, you're not inside the high school principal's office. You're not in court interviewed by a lawyer. Imagine you're just having a dinner date with your best friend. And let's admit it, when you are with your best friend, no holds barred, you're just yourself. When you are with your best friend, you're not trembling. You're not shaking. You're not looking at the ceiling. You're not looking at the wall. Or you're not about to vomit. No anxiety attack. Class, imagine you're just having a casual conversation with the examiner. So let's have a recap for criteria number 2. How to perform well here. Number 1, to pronounce clearly, open your mouth. Number 2, forget about the native accent. Think of neutral accent. And number 3, ideal delivery is not formal, but rather conversational. Okay, now let us proceed to the next 2 criteria, vocabulary and grammar. FYI, whatever I'm going to talk about now, this is also applicable in the writing subtest. So let's talk about vocabulary. The complete name of this criterion is vocabulary and lexical resource. The number 1 concern here is correct choice, correct usage of words. What is it that IELTS examiners notice? In the actual examination, plenty of candidates in both writing and speaking use big words only for the purpose of impressing the examiner. But apparently, IELTS has nothing to do with impressing. IELTS is not about grandstanding. What is IELTS about? Expressing. So when you express, you pick the most appropriate words. More often than not, big words are wrong in the context of sentences. So don't forget about this one. In writing and speaking, no to big words. I'll give you a perfect example. Say, for instance, you are in a dilemma of deciding which word to use. The word that you have in mind is to get attention. But now you're thinking twice. The word get might be very simple. You might not get a 9 if you're only using the word get. So now you're thinking of other words in mind, like to procure attention. Class, if you may ask yourself, Which word is more appropriate when dealing with attention? Do you get attention or procure attention? Apparently, get is simple, but that's the appropriate word. Procure is obviously the bigger word, but this is a word you never use in dealing with attention. At the end of the day, make sure that the word is correct. Class, avoid big words in the IELTS. Now, apart from correct usage, I also want you to know, avoid being repetitive and redundant. Now, some people are thinking, repetitive, redundant, are they different? Aren't they the same? No. What is repetition when you're using exactly the same words? Say, for instance, in the first paragraph of your essay, you write the word crucial. In the next paragraph, you write vital. In the next paragraph, you write essential. In the next paragraph, you write integral. This is one way of avoiding repetition. You are repetitive if in the first paragraph you write crucial, next paragraph most crucial, next paragraph crucially crucial. Oh wow, how crucial. So when you are redundant, you're not repeating the word anymore. Try to guess. Which one are you repeating when you are redundant? It's not the same word, but the same idea. You're going around in circles because it's exactly the same thought. Classic example of something that is redundant, the Filipino expression pizza pie. Why? Because pizza is the Italian word for pie. So imagine if you go to Italy and you order pizza pie, it means to say you're ordering pie. Perfect example of something that is redundant. But I want you to know that vocabulary is concerned not just with words. It is also concerned with sentence construction. So, talking about vocabulary, IELTS examiners want you to play with sentence structures. What I'm going to do for now is to give you two sentences. Kindly tell me if the sentence structure is unique or not. Okay, here we go with a sentence number one. I will go to the canteen. Class, is the sentence structure unique or not? It's not. Why? Even a grade 1 pupil who is proficient in English can easily tell you, I will go to the canteen. But let's compare sentence number one to sentence number two. To the canteen, I will go. Class, is the sentence structure unique in this sentence? I'd say yes. Imagine, how many people do you get to meet walking along the hallway on a regular basis? And then when you meet someone, this person is going to tell you, excuse me, to the canteen, I will go. Well, it's not as if it's every day that you encounter someone who will tell you that. So now I'm letting you know what is vocabulary as criterion. IELTS examiners want you to use correct words. Forget about big words. IELTS examiners want you not just to use correct words, but varied words at the same time. Don't be repetitive, don't be redundant. And number three, you play not just with words, but also the sentence structures. Okay, now we're down to the last criterion that matters in both writing and speaking, and that is grammar. Okay, the complete name of the fourth criterion in writing task, in writing and speaking is grammatical range and accuracy. So, grammatical accuracy, you have to consider the following. Number one, subject-verb agreement. We all know that if the subject is singular, the verb must also be singular. If the subject is plural, the verb must also be plural. But why is it up until now, the others still can't get it right? That is because the others don't know how to identify the subject in the sentence. So let's play a little game, okay? The number of children rises. Kindly tell me, is this right or wrong? I repeat, the number of children rises. Right or wrong? Now, some people are thinking, sir, children, that's plural. You know what? You are right. The word children is plural. It's just that children is not the subject in this phrase. The subject here is the number. The number is grammatic. The number is singular. That's why we say the number rises. So going back, the number of children rises. This is grammatically right. The problem in English is the word before the verb is not always the subject. Sometimes the subject is over there in the beginning of the sentence. So please be advised that before you determine the verb, make sure you know what is the subject in that sentence. Number two, consistency of verb tenses. So in English, the moment you begin the paragraph in the present tense, it has to be present tense all throughout that paragraph. The moment you start with the past tense, it has to be past tense all throughout the paragraph. But wait, what if you're in the middle of the paragraph and you're not really sure which tense you're supposed to use in the next sentence? Very simple tip, guys. You always go back to the first sentence of the paragraph. But whatever tense is used in the first sentence, it has to be exactly the same tense all throughout the paragraph. So now, stick to one tense per paragraph. What about the number one area of difficulty for us Filipinos when it comes to grammatical accuracy? According to IELTS examiners in the Philippines, it's prepositions. Why? We have no other factor to blame but the national language. I'll give you a perfect example. Say, for instance, I'll mention exactly the same sentence versions, one in Tagalog and one in English. You'll understand later on why we have to translate. So let's begin with the Tagalog version. Ako po ay nakatira sa Block 10, Lot 9, sa kalye ng Picampa sa lungsod ng Maynila. Okay, it's translation time, guys. Let's do this one by one. I live at Block 10, Lot 9 on Picampa Street in Manila City. Now, I'm 100% sure you got the point of that example. In Tagalog, the moment we need a preposition, we do not think anymore. It's automatic. We just say sa, sa, sa. But in English, sa is at, sa is on, sa is in. I need you to know, forget about big words. You don't need big words to pass the IELTS. But you want to pass this examination and get stellar band scores in speaking and writing. As early as now, make sure you know when to use in, at, on, by, with, to, for, and so on. Accuracy more than anything else. Do not attempt complicated words if in the first place you cannot get it right. We always go for accuracy more than anything else. Now, what's the complete name again of the last criterion? That's grammatical range and accuracy. So what about the word range? Class, IELTS examiners don't want you to settle for sentence structures that even grade 1 pupils are capable of writing. They want you to think of compound sentence structures or sentence structures that are a bit complex while maintaining grammatical accuracy from beginning to end. Why? I am 100% sure you will never get a 7 in writing if this is how you're going to write. I am happy. My mother is happy. My father is happy. I love my happy family. Oh, wow. I'm happy for you. It cannot get any happier than that. Notice, all of those sentences are grammatically right. But it's not just accuracy that examiners are looking at. They're also looking at your range of sentence structures. So kindly avoid short, choppy sentences. Now, knowing that, the 4 criteria are the ones that matter most. In preparation for your examination, kindly focus on improving your fluency and how well you respond to the question, your clarity of words, neutral accent and conversational approach, correct and varied words and sentence structures, and accurate grammar without settling for short, choppy sentences. If you're able to do that, you're almost there. You're on your way to the United States of America. So now, let us move on to the next slide, another equally important discussion. of the speaking subtest. So if you look at Cambridge books, they will tell you that the speaking subtest would last for about 11 to 14 minutes, divided into 3 tasks. So what is the first one? Task 1 is introduction, which would last for about 5 minutes. In task 1, here's what examiners do. Class, they throw usually personal questions and then no preparation time. Right after you are asked, you have to respond immediately. Now, I've noticed that in task 1, the shorter your answers are, the more questions will be asked. But the longer your answers are, the fewer questions will be asked. I'm 100% sure that no one wants to be asked a lot of questions. That is why in the speaking subtest, in task 1, keep on talking. Provide as many details as you can, because it is much easier to make one answer long than to think of a new answer every time. Now, what about task 2, individual long term? The examiner will give you a tasker that contains a general question. Say, for instance, tell me something about an organization based in your neighborhood. So say, for instance, you might want to say homeowners association, civic organizations like Rotary, Lions, JCs, YMCA, or cooperatives, or senior citizens groups, or let's say Sangguniang Kabataan. It's just that there is a problem if you're going to say Sangguniang Kabataan. Sangguniang Kabataan is apparently not in English. So the moment you mention words that are not in English, I need you to automatically describe it in English. Tell the examiner, Sangguniang Kabataan, also known as Youth Council in English. My only concern is that in the actual examination, you do not have Sir Irvin beside you whispering the English translation of this and that. So as early as now, I need you to know, avoid answers that are not in English. So for instance, if you're asked about your favorite food, why don't you say fried chicken? We are not telling you, or we're not teaching you to tell lies. But at the end of the day, this is not a lie detector test. What is the IELTS? A test of your ability to communicate in English, so you have to stick to English all throughout. Instead of translating, I'd rather that you stick to answers in English so that you don't have to be bothered with translation anymore. Now, for speaking task 2, your examiner will give you a scratch paper and a pen. That means to say, you're allowed to make an outline. You can use this as your guide while you're talking later on. So 1 minute preparation time. What about the actual delivery? Minimum of 1 minute, maximum of 2 minutes. Now, FYI, the moment you fail to reach 1 minute, expect a penalty. The goal of all candidates is to reach the 2nd minute. But class, by the 2nd minute, finished or not finished, stop talking. It means to say that you've reached the finish line already. So, task 2 is the only round that allows you to prepare for your answer. Moving on to task 3, which is known as two-way discussion or follow-up round. This is very similar to task 1. Why? Task 1 and task 3, both of them last for approximately 5 minutes each. Task 1 and task 3, no preparation time. Respond right after you are asked. In fact, only task 2 allows you time to prepare. But what's the difference between task 1 and task 3? Task 1 questions are usually personal, whereas task 3 questions are follow-up answers, or rather, follow-up questions to whatever answers you have provided in task 2. Now, I want you to know, this is the ideal format. It's just that not all examiners follow that in the actual examination. To prove my point, I'm going to share with you now the most important lessons I've learned only after I took the test. I don't want anyone to encounter my horrible experience. That is why I'm telling you now what is likely to happen inside the cubicle. Number 1, for task 1 alone, my examiner asked me 3 topics: house, food, art. For every topic, I was asked 3 questions each. Needless to say, task 1 alone, I was asked a total of 9 questions already. So after the examination, I approached the test center manager. I asked her, how come my examiner did not stick to one topic? The response of the IELTS test center manager, Irvin, what is assessed in this examination? Is it the English or the answer? It's the English, right? So if you're proficient in English, you must be able to express yourself regardless of the subject matter. So now I am letting you know, instead of focusing on just specific topics, what do I tell my students in speaking? Be prepared to talk about anything under the sun. Do not be surprised if the examiner starts by asking you questions related to flowers, moving on to gardening, to traveling, to foreign cuisine, to newspaper, nanotechnology, globalization, and so on. So what is it that 9.09er is going to do? During our final coaching, we gave a handout containing more than 2,000 of the speaking questions that I have gathered ever since I started teaching in 2006. I've compiled all of these and provide these to my students, such that my students message me after the examination and tell me, sir, it's only now that I realized how important this handout is. Even if the examiner is not yet finished, I already know the question because it's something I've encountered beforehand. So, sir, I did not panic anymore. All I did was just to deliver the answers that I had in mind. So, I'm very thankful that we were provided with the actual examination questions prior to the actual exam. Remember what's the good news in IELTS? Questions are recycled. They come out again and again and again. That is why you have to be updated with the most recent questions. Now, number 2. Second lesson I learned when I took the test. In preparation for my exam, we were always told, pick your answer long. Provide as many details as you can. Now, I know I'm a talkative person. I know I can talk all day long, even if there is no topic. It's just that my examiner never allowed me to finish my responses. And I noticed that she usually interrupts after 4 sentences of my response. So on the back of my mind, I told myself, how can I make my answer long when I cannot even finish an answer? So after the examination, I approached exactly the same test center manager asking her, so how come my examiner did not allow me to finish any answer? Don't you think that is disrespectful? Her reply, Irvin, once again, what is assessed in this exam? Is it the English or the answer? It's the English, right? So if you talk for about, let's say, 4 sentences, that's good enough for the examiner to know if your English is good or not. Moral lesson of the story, do not expect to finish your answers. It is perfectly normal. It is common for examiners to butt in while you're talking. Don't take it personally against the examiners. They are legally allowed to interrupt while you are talking. Number 3, on my way home, I was telling myself, she's not the examiner that I expected. Why? Number 1, she's Filipina. And number 2, she maintained a poker face from beginning to end without showing me any reactions. Let's admit it, to a certain extent, we find reactions very important. Why? Because this is one way of gauging our performance if we're doing well or not. But how can you use that as basis if in the first place you cannot even see any reaction? Class, I am letting you know, in the speaking subtest, it is a must that you are not bothered by the reaction that you see coming from your examiner. My examiner, Pamela, never smiled from beginning to end, but I was pleasantly surprised when I look at my result. She gave me a 9 in speaking. There are certain examiners who smile from beginning to end, but might give you 6.5 in speaking. So I repeat, do not focus on the facial expressions of the examiner. Focus on your answer. Focus on the quality of your English if you want to pass the test. Now, I've mentioned that I took the IELTS twice, one in IDP and one in British Council. My first examiner, Pamela, Filipina. My second examiner, Manuel, Filipino. I'm a member of various nursing groups on Facebook, and I just don't understand why Filipinos are afraid of Filipino examiners. In fact, there are others asking, Sir, saan po ba ako mag-exam para hindi Filipino yung aking examiner? And then I responded by saying, try niyo po sa Kazakhstan. Baka walang Filipinong examiner doon. Nagalit siya sa akin, sabi bastos daw ako sumagot. Now, I want you to know, the nationality of the examiner has nothing to do with your chances of making it. There are Filipino examiners like Pamela and Manuel who give us as high as 9 and 8.5. There are also examiners white examiners who give as low as 5.5, 6, or 6.5 in speaking. So I tell you, when you prepare for your examination, don't be bothered by the nationality. You focus on what you're supposed to improve in, and that is your fluency, your pronunciation, your vocab, and grammar without minding, without thinking of the nationality of the exam. And then the fourth lesson I've learned only after I took the test. My examiner in speaking task 3 was arguing with me. You heard me right. My very own examiner was debating with me. And now you might be thinking, why do the examiners have the audacity to argue with candidates? They know that your future is at stake. So why is it that they argue with you? Now, my examiner kept on arguing with me, but I was positively flabbergasted when she gave me a 9 in speaking. So after the examination, I asked the test center staff, how come my examiner gave me a 9 in speaking even if she did not like some of my answers by agreeing with me? And here's what I learned from the test center staff. Irvin, what is assessed in the speaking subtest? It's not the answer, but it's the English. If you want to get a 7 in the speaking subtest, it's English more than anything else. There is no moral judgment whatsoever of your answer. You don't need to be a genius to get a 7 in speaking. But I asked IELTS examiner Ian Wall how to get 9.0 in speaking, and he said intelligence is the key. So if I may differentiate 6, 7, and 9. 6.0, fractured English. Class, 7.0, correct English. But 9.0, correct English plus intelligence. I'm 100% sure the others are not satisfied with a 7. If they know they have the guns to get the highest possible grade in the examination, then you know what you're supposed to do to get that 9 in speaking. Combination of English plus smart answers. I hope that by sharing this with you, it will help you in preparation for the examination. You focus on the quality of your English, regardless of the topic, even if the examiner does not allow you to finish talking. Even if your examiner is Filipino, even if your examiner does not smile, what's most important, you focus on the 4 criteria, and if you're able to do that, you are one step closer to your American dream. Okay, now looking at my phone, it's 7:57. I'm afraid I cannot discuss the let me think about it. Maybe I'll have to ask our panelists if we can extend a bit because it says 6 to 8 p.m. But I have not answered all the questions yet. And I'm sure the others might want to ask more questions knowing that we still have like how many people here? I think we still have 227 people here inside the room. So let's ask the panelists first if they will allow us to extend like
Hi, Sir
maybe for
Irvin.
10 minutes or 15 minutes.
Yes, Sir Irvin, we can. We can extend.
Okay. Answering their questions is more important. We're not in a hurry anyway. Now, let's take a look at some of the questions under the Q&A chat box. And then I'll answer them for you before I move on to the last 2 slides, the combination of results and recheck. Okay, so Miss Mary Jane Ocampo, how to overcome anxiety in this speaking test. You are anxious if you know you're not comfortable. You are anxious if you know that this is not a part of your system. Now, if I may share something with you, English is not my first language. It is apparently my 3rd language. Born and raised in Mindanao, I'm Bisaya. Being a Filipino, my 2nd language is Tagalog. English is not my first language. It's my 3rd language. And you don't really think I was born with this kind of mouth, right? It was an uphill climb. In fact, before, I wasn't able to join the school paper. I wasn't able to join the debating team because of my average English. But I worked my way up. Nothing is a tall order if you make yourself comfortable with it. So what do I suggest? I need you to keep on talking in English, making it a part of your system in order for you not to be anxious. You get to be anxious when in the first place you're not confident. So try to describe everything around you. Say, for instance, where am I right now? I'm actually in my unit conducting the webinar. And if you look to my right, there's the main door to enter the unit. And then if you look at my right-hand side, so there are my shoes. Point being, try to describe everything around you. If you look at my left-hand side, so here's my collection plates. I place them on my wall. Try to describe everything around you. Even your animals. You can talk to your animals in English. Why? Because if you're comfortable, there's no reason for you to be nervous. And don't think of this as an examination. The more you think of this as an interview, the more that you will lose confidence. Imagine you're just conversing. Okay? So let's move on. Anonymous attendee, is there a particular format in writing? What IELTS examiners want you to know, there is a suggested format to make it organized, but there is no singular format that will make you pass the examination. So earlier, if you notice, what did I focus on? I didn't actually say, you need this format to pass the writing subtest, but what did I say? You focus on answering the question in writing, because if there is a specific reason why Filipinos don't get the required band score in writing, it's the lack of answers with substance. Dr. Victoria Clark and Dr. Joanna Motorum said that our answers are mostly superficial. If you improve the quality of your answer, it will help you in going abroad. There is no specific format that will help you pass the examination. The format is just there to make it organized, but the format is not the number one factor that will decide whether you will make it or not. Now, from Dolorfida Mamario. Hi, sir. In the writing subject, is it good to have the introduction and the conclusion with the same ideas? That's rather redundant if you're using exactly the same idea in the introduction and conclusion. The purpose of the introduction is to mention the topic and provide your stand as a writer. And then in the body, your main arguments. Why do you agree? Why do you disagree? What is your opinion? And then in the end, summary of your key points without using exactly the same words in your intro and in your body. So I repeat, it is best that you don't use exactly the same words and the same ideas in your intro and in your conclusion. And then, anonymous attendee, are we allowed to use slang words during the speaking test? Not totally wrong, but kindly avoid words like that. Why? Imagine, not all examiners understand slang. And in the first place, that is informal. Even if you look at the English dictionary, you're not going to see words like ain't, gonna, whatcha, know what I'm saying, whatchamacallit. These words are used in Canto English, so to speak, but that's not used in communication, in the professional setting. So I need you to be professional and conversational, but kindly avoid slang terms. Now, from another anonymous attendee, is it okay to use idiomatic expression during the examination? Thank you. Well, idiomatic expressions are okay, but they are not required. You will pass the speaking subjects even if you don't have an idiom from beginning to end. If you know one or two, you can use it. But how awkward can it get if every sentence has an idiomatic expression? There's such thing as just right, not OA. Okay? If you know an idiomatic expression, maximum of one or two for the entire speaking test, but not to the point of using an idiomatic expression in every response. That's not how you talk in real life. Okay. From Julius Franciscus Pasag, is there a format when delivering your answer in task 2, speaking? I repeat, the format is just there to help you in delivering an organized response. But if you can focus on answering the question with correct delivery, correct pronunciation, and accurate words, not using exactly the same words, and correct grammar, that matters most than a specific format in answering the question. And then from Vicente, in speaking, is it wrong to answer the phrase, as I mentioned before, because I was wondering if that particular phrase caused my lower band score in speaking and observed the examiner that I responded with that phrase on her preceding question, she suddenly shortened our conversation and shortly ended the test. So it's already our third part of speaking. Okay, if I may go back to what I've mentioned earlier, IELTS examiners in the speaking subtest will not allow you to finish your answers. Okay? It's normal for them to butt in. So don't feel bad if your examiner did not allow you to finish. What does it mean if the examiner decided to cut? The examiner has heard enough. The examiner already knows the level of your English. Say, for instance, if you deliver or if you hear me talk for the first 5 minutes, you don't need to hear me talk for 2 hours for you to know my proficiency level in English. Examiners do this every single day. They listen to people talk. So if you talk for like 4 sentences, 5 sentences, that's good enough for the examiner to know if your English is good or not. You do not expect to finish your responses. If you say, as I've mentioned before, that is incorrect English. That is not the reason why you did not get a required band score. Possible reasons why you did not get the correct band score. You did not answer the question. You were too formal. You were too stiff. Your conversation is not engaging. You used exactly the same words from beginning to end. Then you interchange in and on. Those are reasons for you to fail, not necessarily because you said, as I've mentioned earlier. Okay? Another anonymous attendee, is it important to answer all the questions in task 2? Does it affect your band score if you stop or finish speaking ahead of time? IELTS examiners need you to make your answers long. And one way of doing that is to answer all the questions in the task card. It doesn't mean that you will fail if you miss to discuss one point there, but as much as possible, maximize the 2 minutes by discussing all the bullet points in the cue card. Will it affect your band score if you stop or finish before the time? Not totally, it doesn't mean that you will totally fail, but IELTS examiners need you to keep on talking and talking and talking until such time that you reach the finish line. Once again, you can do this if you ask yourself more questions so that you can provide more details. Okay, so those are the questions that I have in the Q&A chat box. So maybe I have like 5 minutes more to talk about combination of results. So United States of America needs you to, wait a minute, here we go. It's buffering if I'm opening the chat box. There, USA. So speaking, what if after your first attempt you got 7 in speaking and your overall band score is 6? It doesn't mean that you passed, but it doesn't mean that you failed. Why? You still need to get a 6.5 overall band score. So in your next IELTS attempt, even if you don't get 7 in speaking anymore, as long as your overall band score is 6.5, that means to say that you made it for your US visa screen. So what is the concept of combination? You submit 2 results, one showing a 7 in speaking and one showing 6.5 overall band score. That's why it says combination, because you submit 2 results. Just make sure that both of them are still valid. Meaning to say IELTS results must not be more than 2 years old prior to your visa application. Now, let's take a look at EOR or recheck. Some people might be asking, why is it EOR? Why not IOR? Remember, IELTS is owned by a British company, and that is Cambridge. That's why they follow British spelling in all forms. But it doesn't mean that American spelling is not accepted. Both American and British are accepted, but the spelling of the words in the passage, the spelling of the words in all answer sheets, all the registration forms, they're always in British spelling. So EOR is remark or recheck. I am pro remark. Question here, is it refundable? Yes. If you get an increase after the recheck. By the way, there are only 2 possibilities after recheck. Number 1, as is. Number 2, increase. It will never go down. So if there are no changes in your scores after the recheck, they keep the money. But if ever there is an increase in one of the 4 subtests, then that's when they are going to give you a full refund of what you paid for. The question is, how much is the recheck? It's not fixed. It depends on the exchange rate. Sometimes it's 4,000, sometimes it's 6,000. So it's totally dependent on the exchange rate. You have to check with the local British Council or IDP what is the latest remark fee. What about the results? Once again, it's not fixed. Why? Recheck is not done in the country where you took the examination. If you're taking the examination in IDP, the speaking recording is sent all the way to Australia and it will be assessed by a senior examiner based in Australia. If you're taking the examination in British Council, the speaking recording will be sent to the UK and a senior examiner over there will assess your performance. So why is it that there are instances results are out in just 2 weeks and sometimes 8 weeks? If few people applied for remark, that's when they can release the results faster. But if so many people are not happy with the grade that they got, so a lot of people filed for recheck, that's when it's going to take quite some time. Some people are not entirely convinced of the idea of recheck because it will take forever for the results to come out. Sometimes it is faster to just retake or repeat the examination because for computer delivered IELTS, results are out in just 5 to 7 days. In this case, if they're in a hurry to submit their examination because their priority date is already current in the US Embassy, sometimes they'd rather close their eyes and pay 11,300 pesos for their next IELTS examination than gamble for recheck. By the way, there is a deadline. It's not as if you can apply for recheck anytime. You have to file for recheck within 42 days or 6 weeks after the written exams. By the way, results are out in 5 to 7 days if it's computer delivered IELTS. For pen and paper IELTS, 11 or rather 13 calendar days. So the moment your results are out for pen and paper IELTS, you have less than a month to decide whether to go for recheck or not. Do I recommend recheck? Well, 50-50. Some of you might be asking, will I always get an increase after the recheck? Like what I've said, 50-50. But why is it that I'm pro recheck? That's because of the experiences of my reviewees before. Very common for 0.5 increase. But what about those who got 1.0 increase? Yes, that is also possible, but relatively rare. But what about the most unforgettable reviewees? Kiara Nicolette Bautista of Niner Eds at Pasay Rotonda initially got 6.5 in speaking, but I urged her to go for remark. It went up all the way to 8.0. So that's 1.5 increase. What about my reviewee from Niner P Campa España? That's Amara Burgos. Initially, she was given a 6.5 in writing. Now, after the remark, it went up to 8.0. So as far as my memory serves me right, both writing and speaking, I had reviewees who got 1.5 increase. But what about the highest increase ever in my last 14 years of teaching IELTS? Jean-Anthony Buen was initially given a 6.5 in speaking. But after filing for remark, it went up all the way to 8.5. So I'd like to highlight that yes, this examination to a certain extent is subjective. If you think that you were not judged correctly by your examiner after your first exam, then go for recheck. If after the recheck your score is still not 7, life does not end there. Why is it that there are 26 letters in the alphabet? And that is because if plan A does not work, it might not be your time. Then you go for plan B, plan C, plan D. Hanggat hindi ka pa umaabot ng plan Z, you do not give up because giving up is just for losers. Now, having said this, I am pro recheck. So let's take a look at some of our slides. Like, yes, it's not something that I have to show in your face. You can check it out with British Council and IDP. We're the #1 IELTS agent for the 13th consecutive year, and we're living up to our name. We have candidates getting 9.0 not just in one, but in multiple components. Look at the scores of Pauline Lopez, who took the test in 2014, 9 in everything except for writing, where she got 8.5. Now, it's a fluke if it happened only once. Another proof of 9.09ers dominion, Jairo Mitchell Mendoza got exactly the same scores as Pauline J. Lopez, 9 in everything except for writing, where he got an 8.5. Now, one lecturer who is still actively connected with 9.09ers, Philip Edward Aitona, who got 9 in 4 components, namely listening, reading, speaking, and overall that, and in writing, he got 8. But looking at these consistently, it's in writing where they failed to get 9.0 in. In my case, I also failed to get 9.0 in writing. That's where I got 8.0. But looking at the scores of our active lecturer, Brian Martin Shawson, he got 9 in writing in his first attempt. When he took the examination the second time last year, that's when he got 9 in everything, making him the first human being, the first Homo sapiens to get 9.0 in all IELTS components. And it doesn't matter where you are, whether you're in the province, you're in the Middle East. Yes, we offer unlimited online review for IELTS. For Health Carousel candidates, instead of charging 6,000 pesos, it's only 4,000 pesos, and that's valid for 12 months. Time is not an issue because there are classes from 9 to 12 in the morning, 1 to 4 in the afternoon, and 6 to 9 in the evening, and you can attend whenever you're available. And what about online coaching? Starting Monday next week, we will have 7 coaches to assess the candidates, and that's 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. daily. So with 12 hours of one-on-one coaching, and you get to enjoy it for 365 days. I don't see any reason why you cannot be coached for the speaking subtest. And then materials are included. If you're in the Philippines, we'll send you a hard copy starting next week. But if you're overseas, we'll just have to email you. Mock examinations and exercises are also included in an unlimited review program. And if we might not have enough time for tonight, you can just send your questions to my personal email ad. And then there's our website right there, nineronlinereview.com. And you'll notice I am very responsive on social media. When I wake up as early as 7 a.m. up until I sleep at 11 p.m., I respond to all messages sent to my personal Facebook account. It's Urban Neil Temporal. And 9.09er IELTS Review Center official Facebook account. And you know it's the official account if it has more than 107,000 followers. So rest assured, I'm the one responding to all the messages sent to these 2 Facebook accounts. So maybe, just maybe, if you still have questions, I can answer them for you. If you don't have questions, maybe I'll turn over the floor to the panelists. I hope that I did not waste your time for tonight. Now, if ever you need to know some other stuff related to the IELTS, you can perhaps suggest to the panelists. So in the future, we can plan for more webinars. Health Carousel and 9.09er have been working for the longest time, and we prefer to keep it that way to help you in going to the United States of America. Okay, from an anonymous attendee, thank you so much. Miss Karen, do we still have another part of the discussion?
Yes. But we would just like to thank you, Sir Irvin, for your time tonight. We did learn
Thank
something.
you.
Thank you. Before we enter, we would like to present you with a certificate of appreciation, if you don't
Ay, ganun
mind.
ba?
So, yes po. Ayan. There you go. So, this certificate is presented to Mr. Irvin Neil Temporal in grateful acknowledgement of his invaluable service rendered as lecturer during the IELTS Masterclass webinar held on the 24th day of July 2020, given this 24th day of July in the year of our Lord 2020, signed by Ms. Consortia V. De La Cruz, President of Health Carousel Philippines Incorporated.